"What do you possibly mean by that?" Jessica asked. She has been arguing in front of the courthouse over the phone for the last 10 minutes. Today was her wedding day. She and her high school sweetheart Burke were supposed to meet up here by 10:30 a.m. to have their wedding. "Burke, it is 10:45 a.m. Where are you?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Jessica, I won't be coming today," Burke said. "What do you mean by that? We are to get married today," she said again. This time she felt something trickling down her eyes. She sniffled to drive away the tears so her makeup didn't get ruined. "Jessica, I don't think I love you enough to want to get married to you and live together in the same house," he said. She felt her heart sank. They had been planning the wedding together ever since he popped the question. He knew of her dream to get married and live in a house that had a yard for the kids to play in. He had no house with a yard, but they planned to get one. "I won't force you to get a house with a yard," she said. Probably the financial burden was getting too much for him. The reason for the low-key wedding was because of the finances. They were both not rich, but if they joined hands together, they could live comfortably. Because they were both orphans, they had no one to invite to the private wedding. They planned to do a private wedding and tell their friends later. "Burke, honey, aren't you going to join me?" A voice echoed from inside the room. Jessica knew that the voice sounded familiar, she just couldn't place it at the moment. "Who is that?" Jessica said in a muffled scream. "Are you beginning to hear things?" Burke asked her. Jessica knew quite all right that she heard a familiar voice. She knew that voice. That was her best friend's voice. "Is that Emma?" she asked, this time tears falling from the second eye. "Why would Emma be here?" Burke asked. Jessica had always been suspicious of her friend and her boyfriend, and finally, the suspicions were proving to be true. "Jessica, go home, and I would come to meet you at night," he said. "I would wait here till you get here," Jessica said. Her voice was pleading. "I would forgive you even if you cheated on me. Please just come over, do not embarrass me," she added, begging. "Okay, yes, Emma is here, and you know what, Jessica, it is over between us. I can't marry you or stay with you. Let's just break up here," he said. "No, please," Jessica begged, her face now drenched with tears. Her pleas were met with empty silence. Burke had cut off the call. Jessica yanked the phone from her ears and decided to call again, but she now discovered it wasn't going through. Burke had blocked her line. She squatted right at the front of the courthouse. She did not care if people were watching her. She just had her heart yanked out and broken into several pieces and handed to her. She cried her eyes out, but couldn't help but overhear the conversation of the man. "I thought you said she would be here on time." Xavier shouted over the phone to his assistant Brian. The doctors had told him that his grandfather had barely 2 weeks left. Xavier had lied to his grandfather that he had a girlfriend. His grandfather had said that the girlfriend be wedded and presented to him before he died, so he transferred the company out of a management specialist to his name. His grandfather knew what a responsible man Xavier was, but he feared that if he left the world, Xavier would be all alone, and later the company would leave the Delgado household. Dawson, Xavier's grandfather, decides that instead of Xavier giving up the company in the long run, he would be the one to leave the company in the hands of those who can manage. It would make him roll on his grave if Xavier gave up on his hard work and sweat. He rather does it for himself. Xavier knew he owed it to his grandfather. When his parents died in a ghastly motor accident that claimed their lives, he had been living with his grandfather who did everything to take care of him. He wanted the business to remain in the household, and this pushed him to get married. His assistant Brian had told him of a contract marriage service where you pay to have a wife for some time. He had gone ahead to sign a contract with a random woman from the service for a year. She was to get married to him with no attached strings and then get divorced amicably after a year. He was in front of the courthouse, but the random woman was now nowhere to be found. He was confused and pissed off at the time wasting. He needed to take his new wife to his grandfather today. He looked at his watch and sighed in annoyance. "I'm sorry, sir. Let me try and reach her again," Brian said, cutting off the call. "What a waste of my precious time," Xavier sighed out loud and annoyed. He hated time waster, and he could not believe that the girl had gone MIA after receiving a part payment for the contract. The phone rang, and he paid no second before picking up the call. And he barked at his secretary. Her company is unable to get a hold of her, Brian responded. She is currently unreachable. Why don't you come back and let's reschedule with the company? They would send us someone else, Brian said. He was lucky he already had a good rapport with his boss, or else he would have peed himself already. I am not going to be leaving this place without a marriage certificate, Xavier replied. He was not intentionally mounting pressure on his assistant. He just needed results immediately. I'll marry you, Xavier heard. He turned to see a beautiful woman with black running eyes. He looked at her and thought why she would be doing this to a stranger. I will marry you, Jessica said again, ending less than a foot away from her. Xavier said, dropping the phone from his ears to look at this girl. How could she just think to get married to him when she knew nothing about him? Are you from the marriage service? He asked. His question threw Jessica off balance. No, she said, biting her lips. She was sure that her makeup was now ruined by all the crying she had done. The conversation she overheard made her decide to make sure she got married before leaving the courthouse, and since this man was in desperate need of a wife, she decided to step up to the task. You need a wife, don't you? She asked, sniffling. Her crying had left her nose running. Yes, I am, Xavier answered. It just occurred to him that she could be an answer to his solution. I was dumped on my wedding day. I don't want to bore you with all the details, but I see you need a wife. I could be your wife, she said. Xavier looked at her carefully. She looked sane after the ruined makeup on her face. He put back the phone to his ear. Ensure to get back the money from the agency. I would sort myself out. See you back at the office, he said, cutting the phone and putting it in his pocket. Let's get married. I'm in desperate need of a wife, so I need not be picky, he said, and she nodded. She was dumped after all, and it sounded well like Burke was not ready to get back together, seeing that he had blocked her number. She wondered where the relationship began to go south and why he cheated on her. Are you going to go in like that? Xavier asked, pointing to her face. Give me a minute to fix up my face. Let's meet inside, Jessica responded, turning on her heel and going to find the nearest restroom. It took her less time than she thought to wipe off her makeup. She had no tools to retouch the makeup, so cleaning it off was the best option for her. She came back and met Xavier standing there. She looked him up and down and thought to herself that at least she wasn't going to marry an eyesore. He was pleasant to look at least. Immediately he saw her, he turned and started walking towards the reserved room. His wealth had allowed him to reserve a private room, so he entered. Jessica followed him in, and they both sat facing the judge. No witnesses, the judge asked, smiling at Xavier. Jessica caught a whiff immediately that Xavier was influential since the judge knew him, and he was able to reserve a private room. I'll call 2 people to stand as witnesses then, he added before calling 2 people, a male and a female. The male was going to stand as a witness for Xavier, and the female for Jessica. The process was shorter than she thought, and soon she was legally married to a stranger. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jessica blinked multiple times. She could not believe she just got married. Under normal circumstances, she was supposed to give her husband a big kiss on his lips. Looking beside her at the stranger who she just found was Xavier Delgado. She still couldn't believe she was married. Would you like to take pictures? One of the witnesses asked them. Yes, Xavier answered, collecting the marriage certificate from the judge. Thank you for today, he said, addressing the judge. Let's go take our picture, he said, standing up and leaving. Jessica could barely comprehend what was going on, but it seemed as if Xavier had come to terms with the fact that he had married a stranger. He seemed comfortable with it. Jessica goes outside and sees him standing in front of the courthouse, holding the certificate. She approached him and stood close to him. If we are taking a picture, we better make it believable that we just got married, Xavier said. You didn't ask me if I am okay with taking a picture, she murmured. She knew they needed the picture, but her broken heart and rash decision stared at her in the face. Did she always need to jump the gun when faced with things she can barely handle on her own? "I need the picture," he said. His voice made sure to pass the aura that the picture-taking was not up for negotiation. She agreed with him and took the picture. After all, she approached him to get married. She would as well go ahead with every other thing. They both barely managed to force a smile in the picture. Jessica could barely smile properly as her broken heart was getting in the way, but Xavier was not used to smiling, so it was difficult for him as well. The photographer had to take a couple of shots more than usual to be able to capture one where the smiles looked genuine. A few copies of the other pictures were taken, and Xavier gives the email address to collect the soft copies of the picture. He was told that the hard copies would be framed and ready the next week, so they could pick it up then. "Hold on to this," Xavier said, giving the certificate to Jessica, collected, and read it over and over again. It did carry her name in full, Jessica Penelope Joshua, and she was married to Xavier John Delgado. "Let's go," Xavier said, walking toward the parking lot. "Go where?" Jessica asked, catching up to his steps. "To see my grandfather," Xavier answered. He hated talking a little too much, but since he just got married, he knew that she would have a bucket load of questions, so he'd do his best to answer only when she asked. "Why?" she asked. "We just got married, and I want to introduce you to my grandfather," Xavier said gently. He was already getting too many words out, and he was not liking it. "Oh," Jessica replied. Xavier stopped in front of a Mercedes, one of the newer models. She did not know much about cars, but she could tell that this car was a very expensive one. It looked exotic and expensive. "Get in," Xavier said. She then confirmed her suspicions that her new husband was influential and rich. She should be happy that she landed a fine, rich young man, but her broken heart could not allow for her jubilation. Xavier was used to driving in silence, but he needed to let her in on some secrets. "As you heard before, my name is Xavier Delgado," Xavier started. Jessica was retained back to reality by his voice from her chain of thoughts. She turned to face him to take in all that he had to say. Since he needed a wife, there must be a backstory. "My grandfather is sick and in the hospital, and he had been hugging me to get married. I was going to get married to a girl from a wedding agency, but she didn't show up, so I got married to you. I had told my grandfather that we have been dating for a year now, and that's why we got married." "Okay," Jessica responded. "What do you do?" Xavier asked her when he saw that she responded. "I'm an assistant chef at Elverine Restaurant," Jessica answered. Xavier knew the place. He had dined there quite several times. He wondered if she had seen him. The thought of her approaching him purposely, since she knew that he was rich, crossed his mind, but he did not bother. He knew that he would settle her to leave with an amicable divorce after a year. Even if his grandfather was still alive, by then it would be easier to convince him of why they decided to divorce. "But you will tell my grandfather that you are currently studying for PhD, he said. "What do you do?" Jessica asked. Xavier wondered if she was being truthful or if she was pretending not to know him. "You don't know me?" Xavier asked. Although he was really a man of few words, he was always curious and made sure to satisfy his curiosity, and this made him a good listener to everyone. His curiosity fueled him to ask if she knew him. "Are you a celebrity?" she asked back. "Even if you were one, I would not know you. I barely have time to make enough money for myself, so I barely know anything about my environment," Jessica confessed. She was horrible when it came to taking note of her surroundings. She could barely tell the difference between celebrities, and she fell asleep when she was seeing movies and only listened to old music. She heard a new song when she was on the bus or in a taxi. "No, I'm not," Xavier answers. It was the first time he met a girl who did not recognize him. He thought that they all knew him and drooled over his pictures in business and fashion magazines. After all, he was an icon in both worlds. "I work in Braxton Industries," he said. "Which of them?" she asked happily. The only reason she knew Braxton was that she applied to work as an assistant chef in their hotel. She was never given, but she went ahead and applied every year while working at Elverine. All of them, Xavier said. For some weird reason, Xavier's answer made her laugh. Well, since the morning, she had barely had a good laugh. She had to give it to him for making her laugh. What do you mean by all of them? She asked while cleaning the tear that fell from her laugh. I'm the chairman's grandson, Xavier answered nonchalantly. What? Jessica asked, her eyes widening beyond its capacity. I'm the heir of the Braxton Industries, he said again. He must truly confess he had a huge amount of patience today. He answered all of her questions without getting angry. What? Jessica asked again. Did she just get legally hooked on a billionaire? Any other thing I need to know before meeting your grandfather? Jessica said as they pulled into the parking lot of the hospital. He is always tired because of the liver cancer, so he can barely talk. Let's just greet him for today, and that would be all, he replied. He hoped that getting to the hospital room would at least get him to stop talking at last. Okay then, Jessica said, pulling out a small mirror in her bag. She checked her image and practiced smiling. If they were dating, she had to make it believable that she was happy being married to a stranger. Xavier stared at her as she did so. There was something very different about her. She has this aura surrounding her that he could not explain. Shall we? Xavier asked, unclasping his seatbelt and opening the door. Jessica did the same, and they both came down. Here is the ring. I hope it fits, Xavier said, pulling out 2 rings from his picket. One has a diamond head crested inside a gold band, the other had little diamond stones crested in a gold band as well. Jessica collected the ring and put it on. She could not believe that she got to wear a diamond ring. The best Burke could have given her would be a stainless band painted gold, but yet still her heart yearned for him. The ring fit perfectly, like she had gotten her fingers measured for it. Stay close, Xavier said. Xavier sounded cold to Jessica, but one could still hear his concern and warmth. She believes that he put up a cold and I don't care front to keep people away from him. It was obvious that that was what he did. Although she was not vested in the recent news and happening, there was not a single soul living in Chichester City who didn't know of the brutal death his parents faced. Some people even thought they were intentionally killed, but the police investigation concluded it was an accident when the other drunk man driving the truck was caught. The culprit was charged with hit and run and imprisoned for only a year and let go afterward. Xavier must be putting up the front to protect himself from letting anyone in and then having to lose them. Here he was about to lose his grandfather, who was now the only person he had in his life. I was wondering what took you so long, Dawson said. He had been expecting his grandson to come, since he promised to bring a wife today. There was a little issue at the courthouse, Xavier replied. Dawson had expected Xavier to show up with an excuse as to why he had no wife, but to his surprise, he was with his wife. He wondered where Xavier had seen a wife. He knew for a fact that he had no girlfriend like he always said. He only let him get away with it because he knew the struggle of his grandson to accept more people into his life. Here he was a girl accompanying him. He wondered where she came from and if she would turn out to be a good match for his grandson. He planned to leave him to a good person. He would fall in love later. And who is this? Dawson said, pointing to Jessica. This is Jessica, and she is my wife, Xavier said, taking Jessica's hand and putting her forward. Jessica came forward and looked at the grandfather. He looked healthier than she thought. Was Xavier sure that his grandfather had last-stage liver cancer? Good afternoon, Mr. Delgado, Jessica said, giving him a slight bow. How could she ever think she would stand before a self-made billionaire not less than talking to him? She felt her feet sweating in her shoes. Good afternoon, Jessica, Dawson said, smiling. For some reason best unknown to him, he liked Jessica. Please call me Dawson, he added. Oh, can I? Jessica asked, somewhat afraid. Dawson could tell that Jessica was not quite comfortable. Did Xavier just tell you this morning that he was a Delgado? Dawson asked, to Jessica's surprise. She stuttered, not knowing what to say. Papa, Xavier said. I'm just asking your lovely wife here why she feels so uncomfortable, Dawson said. I'm not uncomfortable, Jessica said. She didn't want to be the reason that Xavier gets caught, but she wasn't a professional actress or a good liar. Relax, Xavier whispered in her ears. She felt the hot air on her ears and it made her shiver. Sit, Dawson said, pointing to the bedside chair beside him. Jessica pointed to herself, and Dawson nodded. Jessica took the seat and sat beside his bedside. I'm happy you agreed to marry the grump of my grandson, Dawson said. Papa, Xavier said. His voice sounded like a warning. I am sure you would grow to like him better. Dawson continued, ignoring Xavier, who was now breathing heaving, while murmuring complaints under his breath. Please do take care of him, Dawson said. Jessica could feel the love radiating from the grandfather to the grandson. He is still a child at heart, Dawson added in a whisper. I will, Jessica said. She didn't know when the words slipped out of her mouth, but seeing the love from the grandfather and the state he was, she just wanted to do something for him. Her response shocked both men. Dawson had expected her to just skip over the details, while Xavier wondered why she would agree to do strange men favors. They could be serial kidnappers or killers for all she knew. Yet she was fully trusting them and doing them favors. Let me allow the newlyweds to get back to their business, Dawson said teasingly. A blush crept on her face. Although she had no intention of sleeping with this man, hearing it made her feel strange. She had been a virgin all through her relationship time with Burke. She has planned to give it away to him by all means. The way to get it was marriage, and that was why he had agreed. I will come to say hello tomorrow, Jessica said, standing up. She guessed it could be kind of lonely with him alone in the hospital, and she was doing nothing, so perhaps she could come to see him. I would love that. The couple left the hospital room, after much pleasantries and goodbyes. Jessica decided that she liked Dawson. He was a likable old man. She began to see where Xavier got his looks from. His aloofness and coldness, she guessed, came from his parents. The ride was to the house where she would be staying. She knew that she couldn't return to her house, so she followed him home. He entered the gate of a huge mansion and parked his car at the entrance of the house. A man came to collect the key to repark the car. He coiled in shock at seeing a strange woman there. She came down and followed after his boss. Since he had been working here, he had never seen Xavier interested in women. Some of the household staff even thought he was gay. Gather the staff, Xavier said to the women they met at the door. She looked like she was in her mid-40s. Yes, young master, she replied and turned to enter the house. Jessica pinched herself and was shocked she felt the pain. She was convinced this was a dream because how did it happen that she was married to a billionaire all of a sudden? Come with me, Xavier said, turning back when he noticed she had stopped in the doorway. Jessica carefully studied the house and was convinced that the house could pass a castle. It was too majestic and beautiful. Xavier walked into the waiting room and sat. He needed to introduce his wife to the household staff. They may have been married at first sight without getting to know each other, but he was a gentleman, and he was going to make sure she lived comfortably at least for the year they stayed together. Welcome, young master, they said one by one as they entered the waiting room. Xavier didn't bother to reply. Instead, he nodded at them. They all could hardly hide the shock of seeing a woman sit side by side with Xavier. It was not something they had ever seen. The woman in her mid-40s had been working at the Delgado mansion ever since she was a teenager, and this was the first time she had seen the young master with a woman. Is this all of them? Xavier asked when the woman they met at the door entered too. Yes, young master, she replied. Jessica did a quick head count and counted 14 household staff. That was a whole football team and extras. The size of the house from the outside was big enough for the number of staff, she thought. It was strange to her that she went from almost being a housewife to a billionaire in less than a day. She didn't plan for that, but that was her luck. She felt her phone vibrate in her bag, but ignored it. This is Roselle, and she is the head of the housekeeper, Xavier said, pointing to the woman in her mid-40s. And this is my wife, Xavier said. The whole house staff gasped in shock. The young master was married. The introduction to the staff was short, as Xavier decided to only introduce Roselle. He believed that she would learn their names with time. "Come with me," he said, standing up. The whole staff bowed as he left the room. Sure, they were itching to gossip, but they wanted to wait till he left the house. Silently, with looks that said "talk to you later," they all fled the scene. Xavier pushes his room door open and entered. Jessica followed. She noticed that the room was occupied but very neat. Looking at the picture frame on the table, she could tell it was his room. "We will use this room together," Xavier said, to which Jessica gasped in shock. "What, why, how?" Jessica asked, putting her hands up to her breast. "I thought you would give me my room," she asked him. "My grandfather has eyes watching us, and in no time he would know that we are not together," he said, and although Jessica knew that he saying the truth, she couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. "Don't worry, I would not do anything to you, and I'm hopping for the same from you," Xavier said, sounding like she was going to rape him. "Don't worry, I would do no such thing," she answered. "I have cleared out some parts of the wardrobe and the cabinets so you can keep your things in there," Xavier said. "Speaking of my things, I need to go get them." She needed clothes to change into and to wear. "If you don't mind, you could use these things to get yourself some new clothes," he said, pulling out his wallet and removing an unlimited debit card. Jessica had only seen such cards when she helped at the pay point of the restaurant she worked. She contemplated collecting it. "Take it and use it as yours. We still have to discuss the terms of our marriage, but I'll let you get settled in first." She collected it and looked at it. He moved to the door. "You can ask any driver to take you anywhere you want to go. I'm off to work," Xavier said without giving her a chance to speak. She sighed and sat on the edge of the bed looking at the card that came to her hands. She guessed he could get a few things. She could clear out her old place and lease it out. She was glad that she bought the place when she had the opportunity to. A few extra bucks to her credit card debt won't be a bad idea. She was glad she went with flat shoes instead of heels. She went back downstairs and met Roselle on her way up. "Young lady, I was on my way to meet you. Would you like anything to eat or drink?" the woman asked. "I'm Jessica, please call me Jessica," she answered, feeling weird being called a young lady. "I'm sorry, I can't do that," Roselle said, sounding adamant. "I would like to go get my things. I would make dinner for myself when I come back, so I just need someone to show me where everything goes." Roselle was thrown aback by her request. It was still her first day. She would agree with her. "Xavier said one of the drivers can take me," Jessica said, and Roselle nodded. "Let me tell him to prepare the car," Roselle said, bowing before leaving. The driver drove her to her house. She picked up her already packed suitcase. She has suggested that she and Burke move there after marriage since her place was bigger, but Burke had suggested they put up the place for rent for extra cash. The extra cash was going to her alone now. She went to her real estate agent to list her house for rent. Her agent had celebrated with her for moving out. Jessica had skipped over the details, but told her that she had gotten married and decided to leave the place. Her phone vibrated in her bag again, and she picked it up and put it to her ears. "Hello," Jessica Burke's voice rang through the phone. His voice still sent shivers down her spine. "Hello, Burke," she replied, feeling the tears coming back again. The driver was going back to the house. She had decided to go rest and then get whatever she needed the following day. She was exhausted. "Why does it say you got married to Xavier Delgado?" Burke asked. Jessica was disappointed by his question. She thought he was calling to beg her back, but it dawned on her that the reason he called was because he heard that she had gotten married. "How do you know?" Jessica asked him angrily. "Your name and picture are plastered over the internet and news," Burke answered. "Since you moved on with my friend Emma, I decided to move on and get married to him," Jessica said. She felt her blood boiling. Why was she even wasting her time answering his questions? "And my question is how you met him," Burke asked. "How is that any of your business, you playboy?" Jessica answered, allowing her annoyance to get the best of her. "I just wanted to know," he answered, his voice low. "You cheated on me and dumped me, so don't you ever call me again," Jessica said angrily, before cutting off the call and blocking the number. She hated herself that she still had leftover feelings for that man. She has seen the signs ever since she introduced Emma to Burke. They had been getting together, but her need for companionship made her ignore the signs. She hated herself for settling for less. She was married to a stranger, and she had just the bare minimum of interaction with him, but he has treated her better than the 7 years she spent with Burke. The drive to the mansion ended, and one of the boys who ran errands helped her with her bags. She entered the room and took a warm shower before coming downstairs to make herself dinner. She wanted to call Xavier to ask if he liked to have dinner with her, but she discovered that she didn't have his number. She decided to make it for herself only. After a light dinner and the cook fussing over her every movement in the kitchen, she went back to the room. She wanted to wait up for Xavier, but the bed called her, and she slept off before she could say A. By the time Xavier got into the room, he was startled by a strange figure laying on his bed, and that was when it dawned on him that he got married to a stranger today. He felt exhausted from the day's activities and decided to go to bed and have a talk over concerning the contract tomorrow. He took a quick shower and jumped into bed. He used some pillows as a wall between them to keep her out. There was no way he was going to be allowing this woman to touch him. He barely knew her. He would ask his assistant to do a background check on her. Jessica's body clock never failed, and by 5 a.m. on the dot, her eyes were wide open and ready for the day's activity. She had taken her annual leave from work when she was to get married, so she didn't have to go to work. Although they had no honeymoon planned, Jessica still took the leave to spend time with her husband when she got married. She stood up and decided to arrange her things. Yesterday, after dinner, she wanted to arrange them, but she was too tired to do so. It took her not too long to arrange her things. She sorted through them and decided to throw out the things that Burke had given to her. She was sad to let the relationship go down the drain as such, but she needed to move on. She always saw that girls got rid of things from past relationships when entering into another one. After she finished sorting through her things, she went downstairs, since it was a little past 6 to see if there was any worker around so she could get a trash bag to trash out all the things from her ex-boyfriend. She met Roselle standing in the kitchen. "Hello, young lady," Roselle said with a young beau when she saw her. This wife had appeared from nowhere, and Roselle was not sure how she felt about her, but her overall vibe was not bad. But Roselle was old enough to know not to judge a book by its cover. "Good morning, Ms. Roselle," Jessica said. She felt uncomfortable being called young lady, and since Roselle was not going to stop, she would raise her to her level. "I'll be in trouble if you call me that," Roselle said. She knew that the members of the Delgado family should be respected. She had served there for more than 30 years, and she knew that for a fact. "For what?" Jessica asked why anyone would be angry that she respected this woman. "Just call me Roselle," she said, avoiding her question. Everyone living in the mansion knew of Xavier's temper. "Can I get a trash bag? I want to throw out some of the things," Jessica said, dropping it since she could see the discomfort on her face. "Leave it out, I'll send one of the girls to clean it up after breakfast," Roselle said. How could she make the new lady of the house do manual labor? "Speaking of breakfast, what would you like to have?" Roselle added. "You don't need to make breakfast for me. I can manage," Jessica responded. She has loved cooking and had been cooking for herself. "I can't do that," Roselle said. "Let her do whatever she wants to do," Xavier replied from behind them. Startled by a strange voice, Jessica turns around to find Xavier in a house coat, his hair all messy and him looking sexy. She decides that lying was a bad thing since her young days at the orphanage home. Her husband was looking breathtaking. "Good morning," he said, looking at her. His voice was husky and a bit rough, probably because he just woke up. "Good morning," she said, pulling herself together. His voice was drawing her attention greatly. "Can we talk now?" he asked. Roselle bows and leaves them to be. Anyone could tell that the two of them were not together, so they might have a lot to talk about. So Roselle left. She had a great urge to protect Xavier, so she was wary of anyone who came close to him. She knew how his parents died, and the public suspected that there was a killer, but the police investigation ended as an accident. With the culprit caught, everything was closed quietly, but it put a big hole in the spirits of those left behind. "Yes, sure," Jessica responded. She had many things to ask and tell him. "Roselle," Xavier called. She entered back and met him while bowing. "Yes, young master." "Let someone take care of the things she wants to throw away," Xavier said, motioning toward Jessica. "Also prepare lunch for Papa. Jessica would be visiting him today," he added. Jessica had promised to go to his grandfather. He did not want it, but he knew his grandfather gets worried and lonely. She could be of good company, who knows. "Let's go," he adds, turning on his feet towards the staircase. Jessica turns to smile at Roselle before making her way toward where Xavier had left to go. He climbs upstairs, and instead of turning to their room direction, he turns the other way and makes his way to the little sitting room upstairs. They could talk there. "Have a seat," he said, taking his seat. She sat close to him but put a little distance between them. Jessica looks around the room. There's a portrait that contains the grandfather she was at the hospital alongside a man and woman holding up a toddler. It must be Xavier. She adored how cute he was. "We need to discuss the terms of our marriage," Xavier said, when he caught her eyes wandering the whole place. He intended to discuss the terms to help them live together and respect each other. "Let's hear it," Jessica said. She had gotten married out of impulse, so she believed nothing could be worse than that. "First of all, I'm not looking for a romantic partner," Xavier began. "Totally agree. Can't possibly have sex with a stranger," Jessica said. "I just needed a wife to show my dying grandfather. After a year, we can go out separate ways. Do not worry, I would compensate you accordingly," Xavier said. "I'm married to you already. Although I made a rash decision, it can't be undone. Let's live in peace and try as much as possible to be friends," Jessica said. "Friends?" "Yes, friends," Jessica said, standing to her feet and stretching out her hand for a handshake. Xavier stood up and took her hand. He hadn't had a friend in a long time. Having a friend doesn't sound so bad. "Would you like some breakfast?" Jessica asked, now feeling good. It would be a bad thing if she was to be avoiding him. Their being friends could put her mind at ease. "I don't eat breakfast," Xavier said sharply. "Come on. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day," Jessica said kind of playfully. She was carefree, and even though her mind was not fully pulled off from Burke, she was doing all sorts to distract herself from the fact that she was dumped and married within a day. "I don't have breakfast," Xavier said coldly and more sharply than before. "I'm a good book. Remember that I'm a chef," Jessica said convincingly. "Drop it," Xavier said and began to walk away. Maybe he doesn't like breakfast, she murmured to herself and shrugged before leaving the room. She went back to her room and discovered that the clothes she put out had been taken away. She went back down and made a simple breakfast of oats for herself. She had it before going back up to freshen up for the day. Since she already said that she would be visiting his grandfather, she better keep her promise. She was going to visit him and then shop for some dresses with the card that Xavier gave her. She was left with almost no clothes because most of them were gifted to her by Burke. Burke had been such a sweet person. He insisted on getting her dresses and clothes. She barely spent money on getting anything for herself. He always spent on her. She was sitting in bed waiting for Xavier to be done in the bathroom. He came out and entered the walk-in closet to change. A thought crossed her mind and decided to talk it out with him. Xavier, she began. "Yes, speak," he responded from inside. Jessica thought it strange that he sounded like a king from the old days. "I took a leave from work because of my wedding. It would be for 3 weeks only. I am going to be resuming back after the time expires," she said. She only thought it courteous to let him know, seeing that Burke had called her that means that he had put out the news. "I do not think that is a good idea," he said gently. He knew the way women were sensitive to getting and retaining jobs as issues. He didn't want to be seen as the man who refused his wife from working. Confused, Jessica asked, "What do you mean by that?" She knew herself to be rash and spontaneous, so she tried controlling herself in case she went ahead to say something that doesn't end well. "Well, for starters, my wife can't be seen outside working," Xavier said. Jessica knew she got married to a big name in the world. Maybe one of the biggest for a matter of fact, but she loved more than anything working in the kitchen. Are you saying I wouldn't be working? Jessica asked, confused. No, I'm saying let's find another way around it. Maybe we can find you a bigger position at any firm or open up your business. Jessica's mouth fell open at the mention of business. Her dream was to open up a restaurant of her own. Almost everyone in the city is aware of the fact that we got married yesterday, so they would be poking into your matters. It would be better if we think of an option that would befit my status, Xavier said, coming out with his tie in hand. Well, it all sounds kind of strange, Jessica answered. She had no money to open up her business, so that was a no. And when they spilt up, even if she was given enough money to do whatever, she would feel worthless if she had nothing to do. Although they were yet to reach an agreement because Xavier had to leave for an early meeting, they agreed to continue when they got back at night. Jessica ensures to get her number, and that was when she finally got to see her phone. She had multiple calls and text messages and messages on her socials. She decided to take some time to look over the messages. Most of them were congratulating her on snagging the billionaire of Chichester City. It was truly no easy task. Some media houses were even requesting an interview with her. She decided that she would speak with Xavier before turning them down. She would turn them down anyways. She even got messages from those who were jealous and decided to wish her ill luck. She decided to leave it be when a message from her aunt caught her eye. Jessica did not know her dad, but she lived a little time with her mom before she died. Her aunt could only keep her for a year before sending her to the orphanage. Her aunt had resurfaced in her life after college and had been requesting money every time from her. She remembered the year she spent with her aunt to be full of torment and physical abuse, but she had no iota of shame to come back and demand money. Her mom was poor, so she had no insurance on her life, but she did have a little savings. Her aunt had said she used the money to take care of her, but in reality, she squandered the money and sent her away after the money was exhausted. Her aunt had sent a link which was an article about her surprise marriage. Her aunt was demanding to know if it was true. Jessica knew well not to answer. Instead, she read the article, and she saw how she has painted the mysterious woman while the writer dotted love and attention on Xavier. She put down the phone and stepped into the bathroom. If she wasted more time reading the comment and articles alongside the messages, she would be late and might not accomplish all on her to-do list today. She entered into the huge bathroom, which was twice the size of her bedroom before. On the bathroom counter, she found a face wash belonging to Xavier. She picked it up and read the product name. It was the same one that Burke used to use. Her face began to feel hot and itchy, and before she could tell what was going on, she was in full crying mode. She had tried to act okay and smile more, thinking the feelings she had for Burke would all go away. Anyone would think she was insane. It was not her plan, but here she was married to a billionaire with media houses waiting to give her an interview, yet she was crying for a man with little less than $1 million to his name. She clutched her chest, and tears could not stop flowing from her face. She wished she could go back to the previous day and go back to convince Burke to get married to her. She believed that if she could go and kneel before him, he would agree and they would get married, and she would be living in her happily ever after. She sat on the bathroom floor and tears continued to flow. She felt her stomach become tight and tighter. She was heartbroken. She wondered if this is what it felt like to be dumped. Her tears were flowing too much. She began to hate herself for crying over poured milk, but she couldn't stop crying. She missed him. Jessica stepped out of the elevator on the hospital's private VIP floor and made her way to Dawson's room. She was healthy and never had the chance of going to hospitals, talk less climbing up to the private floor. Marrying a billionaire overnight has its perks. She pushes open the door and sees Dawson eating cut-up apples while watching the television absent-mindedly. "Hell, sir," Jessica said, trying to get his attention on her. "I've told you that you can call me Dawson," he said as his face lit up. Dawson was bored at the hospital. His grandson had to run things around since he had been hospitalized for almost 6 months. He had a caregiver, but she was mostly rigid and afraid, and refused to talk probably because it was not in her job contract. "How are feeling today?" Jessica asked, ignoring his statement. She felt weird calling him by his name. He was old after all. "Waiting to die," Dawson said, joking. Since the doctor had told him that he would definitely die, he had been making jokes out of his situation. He felt better if he made the joke, and others laughed at it. "Don't worry, you can laugh," he added when he saw the troubled expression on her face. "I don't find it funny," she said, voicing her opinion. She barely knew him, but she just unconsciously became family with him, and losing him may be too much for her. After all, she always left family less, and come to think of it, she was going to be left without one once more when she gets divorced. "Here, Ms. Roselle made this delicious meal for you," she said, putting down the lunch bag in her hand on the bedside cabinet. "Is it something I would enjoy?" Dawson asked. Since had been there, they had been forcing a healthy diet on him. He knew that they mean well. He was just exhausted from eating bland and colorless food. Jessica smiles and starts unwrapping the lunch bag. Inside is a plate of plain oats, a plate of salad, and some fruits too. Jessica wondered why he had to eat such. Immediately, he saw the content. He scrunched his nose upwards. He wasn't expecting anything better than what he had received. It was Roselle, after all. She would make sure to make a meal that would make him go mad. "Be a darling and get me a hamburger and Coke," Dawson said. "Are you allowed to eat it?" Jessica asked. She knew that she would not be able to survive eating this kind of meal, so she was moved to get him something she would enjoy. She knew from her own experience that when she was having a tough time, eating what she wanted was a good thing, and it cheered her up. He may be dying, but at least his food should have color and life. "Of course, sure," he answered immediately. Jessica sensed foul play in his words. She knew now that he was not allowed to eat them, but she still wanted to give it to him so badly. "Why would an old man like myself lie to you?" Dawson asked. He knew that using his age would get him what he needed. She was new, and she knew nothing about his situation, so getting what he needed should be a piece of cake. "Okay then," Jessica said and left the room. She came back a few moments later with a burger and a small Coke. She began to unwrap the burger and then gave it to him. "What do you think you are doing?" A voice behind them screamed and charged at them. It was Xavier. "What are you doing?" Xavier asked, entering inside. He had left the office on his lunch break and decided to come to see his grandfather, only for him to realize that someone who happened to be his wife was giving his grandfather some oily treats. "Are you okay, Papa?" he added, rushing over like his grandfather was involved in some accident that could claim his life. "How could you?" he said harshly to Jessica, who seemed confused. She had only caved in because the old man had assured her that it was okay, and also because he seemed to need something to take his mind off the depressing atmosphere of the hospital. "I asked her for it," Dawson said, jumping to her rescue. He knew his grandson, and he knew that he would be berating her for no big reason. "And you should have been wise enough to refuse him," Xavier said. Jessica didn't know what about the sentence pissed her off, but she could feel her eyes becoming heavy from his words. It was like he washing her face in onion juice. "I'm sorry," she muttered gently. She could feel her voice shaking, and she was holding herself back from crying. "I would prefer if you don't make that mistake again," Xavier added. "Okay," she muttered, looking upwards and sniffing. Her vision was getting blurry, and she could feel the years threatening to fall. "He is sick, and I don't feel like we should be worsening the situation." "Are you always a jerk?" Jessica said, dropping her head and giving away to allow the tears to fall down her cheek from one eye. "TTTT, Xavier stammered in response. "I get it. I made a mistake. I even apologized, but you have just refused to let it go," she said with annoyance obvious in her voice. "I just wanted to make sure you got what I was saying," he said more humbly when he saw the tears on her cheeks. "Even a deaf man would have gotten what you were saying," she said, walking to the door. "I just go outside and have this," she said, holding up the burger packed to him. "When you are leaving, I'll come back. I can't stand to be in the same room with you now," she finished and left them. "You were very foolish," Dawson said as soon as Jessica stepped out. "Papa," he cried out to his grandfather. He was just afraid that his having such oily for would accelerate his death. He was not ready to deal with the loss of his grandfather yet. "Go out and apologize to her immediately," Dawson said. Dawson knew his grandson was barely a human. He had turned himself against everyone and shut them out, which was a major reason he wanted him to get married before he left. He thought that Xavier would at least try to get someone he would love. He was shocked to see him appear out of the blue with a stranger, and he was even more shocked to see the stranger stand with him. He had not known Jessica for long, but she seemed nice enough to him. "Get out there and apologize now." Xavier knew that his grandfather would badger him into saying sorry to Jessica. Although he saw nothing wrong in what he did, he decided to apologize to save himself the trouble. He stepped out of the room and met Jessica sitting on one of the waiting chairs, munching on the burger while sipping the Coke. Her eyes caught him as he took long strides toward her. She rolled her eyes at him, hoping that he saw her, and turned her face the other way. Xavier sat quietly beside her. He had grown up living a luxurious life. He had never needed to say sorry to anyone before because he was always right even when he was wrong. Learning at a young age that money fixes everything, he decided to go with that approach to life. He cleared his throat multiple times. "Got something stuck in your throat?" Jessica asked, ensuring that her annoyance is felt in her voice. He shook his head and cleared his throat again. Apologizing was harder than he thought. "If you have something to say it now," Jessica said, giving him a chance to apologize for, after all, that was what he was outside to do. She was sure that Dawson had asked him to apologize. He stared at her and said nothing. In annoyance, she stuffed the last bit of the burger into her mouth and then stood up to throw out the package it came in. She walked back into the room. "I hope you are not mad at me," Dawson said as soon as Jessica entered the room. He was 100% sure that his grandson did not apologize. "Why would I be mad at you?" Jessica asked, and then added in a whisper, "It's your dumb grandson I'm mad at." "He is barely a complete boy," Dawson said jokingly. "Well, he doesn't have to be a total *SS, Jessica said, almost bursting into laughter. "He is clueless on most matters that don't include business," Dawson said, trying to be her mind. "I know I made a mistake, but he could explain more gently instead of making me feel bad," Jessica said. "I will apologize in his stead," Dawson said. Jessica began to feel better, and this adorable old man was apologizing. She could shake it off and live a lighter life. She was an extremely simple person who made shotgun decisions and lived freely. She stayed a few more minutes with Dawson before she decided to go back home and make herself lunch and arrange the things she got herself. "I'll come tomorrow, bye," Jessica said as she was at the door ready to leave. "Be sure to come," Dawson said, already missing her. "I sure will." Jessica got outside to see that Xavier had left already. "Jerk," she muttered and made her way downstairs. The ride to the mansion was short because her mind wandered. Her phone rang and she looked down at it. It was her aunt, probably looking for money as it was her usual way. Xavier walked back into his office with a scowl on his face. He had gone to visit his grandfather, but ended up getting scolded. "What's the big frown all about?" Brian asked, following his boss into the office. "What frown?" Xavier asked back. Brian and Xavier had a complicated relationship. They both went to the same school under the scholarship fund provided by the Delgado family. Brian was also bullied, and the stone-cold and quiet Xavier came to his rescue, and since then they had been close. When Brian left school and got a job at the company, he began to work for Xavier, hence their close relationship. Although Xavier was cold as usual, only Brian could talk to him like that and get away with it. They had a complicated and strange relationship. Rumors spread around the company that they were in a relationship, which came to an end when Brian got hitched to his crush. She was one of the girls bold enough to go after Xavier, but then she fell in love with Brian. Everyone thought it strange when she changed her goal from going after Xavier to Brian, and finally got him down with marriage. You see, the thing is that no normal person would go around the world looking like that except if they are mad about something, Brian said, sitting on one of the sofas in the office. Xavier muttered something about how he wanted to end Brian's life. He took off his suit jacket and hung it up on the jacket stand. In Chichester City, it was pretty warm in June, and Xavier was creating his source of heat from his belly as he complained internally about his new wife. Well, since you aren't telling me, it means it is something that I can't solve, so I'm going to go away now, Brian said sarcastically, standing up. Wait, Xavier called out as Brian reached the door. Yes, he answered in a sing-song voice. When you wrong your wife, how do you apologize? He asked him quietly. It's been only a day and you've wronged her already, Brian asked incredulously. He knew his boss was one to do things the way he pleased, but he thought since she was one who he didn't know well, he would, at the very least, give her a break from catching his annoying nature. Well, it's not like I wanted to annoy her. I spoke as usual and she just started crying, he answered. You spoke as usual? Brian asked. Xavier's usual was not something anybody wants to hear. He was always ruthless with his words, as if he was in a battle with everyone. Don't speak as usual to a girl who was dumped and married you. She saved you from losing your company to a specialist, Brian said. He knew his boss well, and he knew that once the business was mentioned, he tends to get softer about the situation and try all he can to fix it. Well, that's true, Xavier said. He hated that his friend was right and that he needed to apologize. He needed validation that he wasn't hard on her. Just go back home and say sorry. It's not that hard. Jessica had made herself a full lunch. The house help saw her cooking. She even offered to make something for them, to which Roselle declined. After her filling lunch, she went ahead to fill up the things she bought into the side of the closet that Xavier had cleared out for her. She had gone to a thrift store and gotten the clothes she needed. She wished she had a little extra money with her so she didn't have to spend from her husband's limitless card. Although what she spent was not so much, she still felt bad and decided to wire him back the money as soon as she started working again. She had pulled up her savings and used them to furnish Burke's house because she thought she would be living there after the wedding. She wanted to get her money back from him since he cheated on her, but she was afraid she would embarrass herself in his presence when she gets there. She knew her heart was still too fragile to handle seeing him with another woman, and her best friend at that. She was so busy with her things that she didn't notice Xavier, who was standing there watching her. Xavier cleared his throat to get her attention. He came in quietly as a mouse and stood there hoping she would turn around soon. After he spoke with Brian, he decided to apologize. If not, he felt that things would be weird for him since he had to see her every day. Startled and with hands on her chest, Jessica turned around to see Xavier standing there. His expression looked like he was about to make a snarky comment. She eyed him up and down. No doubt he was a price when it came to good-looking men, but she could tell he would have the worst kind of talking habits. Can we talk? Xavier asked, hoping she would face him. I have nothing to say to you, but if you do, feel free to get on with it, she responded, hanging out the dress too she got. Well, he started with gritted teeth. She showed him no respect. Was he to be speaking to her back? I made some errors while speaking today and I went too far. I would like to apologize and say sorry for my errors, he said. He felt weird. Never had he apologized to anyone. His grandfather had spoilt him silly and kept him safe. After all, when he lost his parent, he became sensitive to everything and everyone. Is that what you call an apology? Jessica muttered to herself. Sorry, I didn't get you, Xavier asked. He only heard the word apology. I said thanks for the apology. It's all fine. I did make a mistake after all, Jessica. She turned to him and gave him a half-assed smile. He tried to smile back, but seeing that smiling wasn't his strong suit, he dropped it and settled for a smirk. What would you like for dinner? Xavier asked. I'll ask the staff to prepare it. Don't worry about my dinner. I'll cook it myself. Do you want to join me for dinner? Jessica asked him. He wanted to decline the offer because all his life He had only been eating meals prepared by 7-star hotel chefs, but the look on her face made him know that his eating this dinner was what was going to determine if he was forgiven. Moreover, she was a chef too, although assistant chef, she should still do a great job. Sure, he responded. Great, Jessica said, clapping her hands together. Let me put this away, and I'll get started with dinner, she said, pointing to the bags on the ground. And also, can you forward your account number so I can pay for what I owe? I know you gave me the card to use for household needs. It's just that I'm a little short in cash now, so I'll send it to you as soon as I resume back to work, she rambled on. About your work, I think we should still talk over it, Xavier said, and stopped talking. Jessica needed more information, but he thought it best to hold his horses and just be quiet. Okay, when do you want to talk about it? She asked, seeing that he wasn't going to give her more information than that. Maybe after dinner or tomorrow morning, he said. He knew that what he was about to bring up would be a touchy subject, seeing that she was ready to return the money she spent. He was just apologizing, and he didn't want to get himself more into the mess, so he would allow her to calm down before telling her that her job is way below his status, and he can't allow her to work there anymore. Okay then, anytime, she responded, hanging the clothes up. Soon she was done and left the room to go to the kitchen. Xavier had gone to his study to do whatever Jessica was unaware of. What is Xavier's favorite food? Jessica asked Roselle, who was now following her every step as soon as she got into the kitchen. Roselle raised her eyebrow at Jessica. She wanted to loudly express her displeasure that she calling herself his wife, and she didn't know the common things such as a favorite meal. Don't judge me. Jessica jumped to defend herself when she saw the judgmental look on her face. It wasn't her fault that she ended up in this marriage like this. She expected to just get married to a random man who needed an urgent wife outside the courthouse. Okay, so what is it? Jessica went on pressing. Maybe when Roselle's facial tense lines reduce a bit, then she would get more comfortable and tell her the funny story of how she ended up being the wife to her boss. Otherwise, she would hear her amusing herself with the story. Why don't you let us handle the cooking? Roselle said uncomfortably. Don't worry, I'm a very good cook, Jessica responded with a smile. And it's not like I am going to put poison in his meal, she added, with put a bug frown over Roselle's face. I said I won't be putting it, Jessica said with a chuckle.